It's Friday night, and your phone is face down on the counter, and you feel something strange. Not loneliness, not sadness, just a quiet, almost guilty relief that nobody is asking for you tonight. The lights are low, the apartment is quiet, and for the first time all week, your shoulders aren't braced for someone's mood. And underneath that calm, a thought sneaks in. Maybe something is wrong with you. Because everyone keeps telling you that humans need people, that alone is sad, that solitude is a problem to fix. And yet your nervous system disagrees the second the door closes behind you. If this lands somewhere uncomfortable, drop a single word in the comments. We're about to walk through what's really happening inside the self-sufficient introvert and why it's not the defect the world keeps pretending it is. Because what looks like withdrawal from the outside is often the cleanest, most honest form of self-respect there is. And nobody around you has the language for that yet. Here's the first thing nobody tells you. Self-sufficient introverts aren't antisocial. They're anti-noise, anti-performance, anti-being emotionally billed for things they never agreed to carry. Watch what happens when your phone lights up at 9 p.m. with a text that says, "Hey, you up?" Your jaw locks, your stomach drops half an inch, not because you don't care, because you know what comes next. 40 minutes of someone unloading their week into your chest, no question about yours, no awareness of the weight, just a quiet assumption that you'll absorb it, like you always do. And the second you stop replying within 10 minutes, you become the cold one, the distant one, the friend who changed, as if having a limit is a personality flaw instead of a sign of life. The self-sufficient introvert isn't avoiding people. They're avoiding the version of themselves that disappears the second other people enter the room. That's a different problem entirely.
Because somewhere along the way, you learned that being available was the price of being loved, that saying no would cost you more than saying yes. So you said yes for years until your body started saying no for you. The headaches before the family dinner, the sudden exhaustion before the group chat hangout, the weird flatness on your day off when you finally have nothing to manage. That isn't laziness, that's a nervous system finally exhaling. Here's the first hidden trait. The self-sufficient introvert has built a private inner world so detailed, so quietly satisfying, that other people's small talk feels like static in a room they were trying to think in. Take Ethan. He spends Saturday morning making coffee, opening a book he's already read twice, and watching the light move across the kitchen wall. And his sister calls and says, "You really should get out more." She means well. She also has no idea that what looks like emptiness from her side is the richest part of his week, the part where his mind finally stops translating itself for everyone else. That's the cost no one warns you about. When your interior life is louder than most people's exterior one, you start to feel like a foreigner in conversations everyone else seems to enjoy. The second hidden trait is the slow, quiet allergy to performance, to smiling on cue, to being on, to being the version of yourself that fits whichever room you walked into. You can do it, you're good at it. That's the trap. People praise the performance and assume it's the person, and you go home feeling like you just spent 4 hours in a costume that fit too tight. Here's the quotable part. Most people are addicted to being seen. The self-sufficient introvert is addicted to being real, and those are almost never available in the same room. The third hidden trait is the deep, almost spiritual hatred of emotional debt, of owing someone a smile, a reply, a presence you didn't actually feel, of being polite when you were supposed to be honest. Picture Chloe at a coworker's birthday lunch. She laughs at the right moments, says the right things, drives home and feels a strange residue, like she just left herself somewhere on that table. That residue has a name. It's the cost of buying belonging in a currency you don't actually own. And the self-sufficient introvert eventually refuses to keep paying it, even at the price of seeming cold.
The fourth hidden trait is the radical preference for depth over frequency. One real conversation a month outweighs 30 surface ones. One person who actually sees you outweighs a calendar full of dinners. And the world doesn't reward that. The world rewards the constantly available, the constantly visible, the people whose lives photograph well. Quiet depth doesn't trend. It just slowly saves your life. Tell me in the comments if you felt that. The strange grief of realizing you can have 100 contacts and still not have anyone you'd call at 3 a.m. without rehearsing the sentence first. The fifth hidden trait is the surgical use of energy. You're not lazy. You're not antisocial. You just refuse to spend yourself on rooms that won't return the investment with anything real. You've watched people drain themselves into friendships that flatten them, jobs that erase them, relationships that turn them into a softer, smaller, more agreeable version of who they used to be. And somewhere inside, you decided you'd rather be alone and intact than surrounded and edited. That decision feels selfish in this culture. It's actually one of the sanest moves a human can make. The sixth hidden trait is the disturbing comfort with your own thoughts. Most people fear silence. They fill it with podcasts, scrolling, calls, noise, anything to avoid hearing themselves think. You don't. You can sit in a quiet apartment and not flinch. You can take a long drive with no music. You can eat alone in a restaurant without checking your phone every 2 minutes.
That's not a small thing. That's a nervous system that has stopped treating itself as bad company. Most people will never experience that, and they'll call your version of it cold instead of envying it. The seventh hidden trait is the long, careful audit of who actually deserves access to you. Not who wants it, not who says they love you. Who has earned the right to walk into your inner life without breaking things? Because access used to be free. You used to hand it out at every party, every job, every crush, every needy friend who said the right words at the right moment, and you paid for that generosity for years. Now you're quieter about it. You watch how people behave when they think you're not paying attention, how they treat servers, how they handle disappointment, how they react when you say no. That isn't paranoia, that's data. That's a brain that finally learned its lesson and stopped paying tuition twice for the same class. Now picture this. You're at a wedding, polite, clean shirt, holding a drink you're barely sipping, and someone leans in and asks, "So, why are you still single?" And the whole table waits for an answer. The honest answer is that you'd rather be quietly alone than loudly mismatched. That you'd rather miss out on the wrong person than spend years performing love with someone you don't actually like. But you can't say that out loud. So you give them a soft joke, a deflection, a smile. And under the table, your jaw tightens because you know they wouldn't get it even if you tried. That's another quiet cost. You speak fluent everyone else, but very few people speak fluent you. And after enough years of one-way translation, you stop offering the deeper version of yourself in casual rooms. Here's another one. You finally take a Saturday with no plans, no errands, no obligations. And by hour 3, your body unclenches in a way that almost scares you because you didn't realize how braced you've been.
That tension you've been carrying isn't from being alone. It's from being constantly anticipated, from having every part of your week shaped around someone else's mood, schedule, or emotional weather. The self-sufficient introvert isn't running from people. They're running toward a version of themselves that only shows up when the room finally goes quiet. And that version is the most honest one they've got. There's also the workplace cost. You sit in meetings where someone takes 10 minutes to say what could have been a 3-line email, and you can feel something inside you slowly hollow out. You stay polite, you nod, you contribute when it matters, and then you go back to your desk, put on headphones, and quietly do twice the work of the loudest person in the room. They get the credit, You get the calm, and somewhere along the way you decided that calm was worth more than the credit, even though nobody around you has the math for that trade. Here's the hard part. The self-sufficient introvert often gets accused of being arrogant, of thinking they're above small talk, of acting like they're better than the room. That accusation hurts because it isn't true. You're not above the room. You're just exhausted by the contract, the unspoken contract that says you have to be entertaining, agreeable, and emotionally available on demand to deserve a seat at the table. You'd rather lose the seat than keep paying that price. And that's the moment most people start mistaking your peace for coldness because they've never tasted real peace themselves. Now we go deeper, because none of this started in adulthood. The self-sufficient introvert is almost always built in a very specific kind of childhood, in a very specific kind of household. Picture a kid sitting on the carpet, alone, building something out of Legos, while the adults in the next room argue or drink, or simply talk past each other like their kid isn't there.
That kid learns something most kids don't, that their inner world is safer than the outer one, that nobody's coming to entertain them, that comfort isn't something you asked for, it's something you build. 20 years later, that kid is you, sitting in your apartment, perfectly capable of feeding yourself, calming yourself, entertaining yourself, comforting yourself, because you've been doing it since you were 7. Drop a word in the comments if you grew up like that. The kid who got told they were so independent so early, when really they were just quietly raising themselves while everyone else was busy. Here's the part that hurts. You weren't born self-sufficient. You were trained by absence, by indifference, by having to figure out emotional regulation alone before you even had the words for it. And what started as survival hardened into identity. The kid who couldn't depend on anyone became the adult who refuses to. Even when help is finally safe, even when love is finally real. That's the inheritance nobody talks about. You learn to need nothing because needing was unsafe. And now, even healthy connection feels slightly suspicious, like a too-good-to-be-true offer in your inbox. So you keep your circle small. You keep your access tight. You keep the door locked, not because you don't want anyone in, but because you remember what it cost the last time you opened it without checking. That's the quiet wound under the calm. And the work isn't to abandon your self-sufficiency. The work is to notice when it's still running on a threat that ended a long time ago. Here's where it shifts. Once you understand that your introversion isn't a defect, but a finely tuned instrument, the shame around it starts to dissolve. You stop apologizing for needing space. You start treating your alone time as maintenance, not avoidance, like sleep, like food, like the literal infrastructure that keeps you human in a world that would otherwise turn you into a vending machine.
You also start choosing differently. Not the loudest friend, not the flashiest partner, not the most impressive crowd. You start choosing the people whose silence feels safe instead of the people whose noise feels exciting. And you start to notice something almost embarrassing. The people you actually feel at home with are rare. Maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 1. And that's not a failure of your social life. That's the math of depth. You stop measuring yourself by how full your weekend is. You start measuring yourself by how easy it is to breathe in your own apartment when nobody's there. That's the real metric. The self-sufficient introvert isn't avoiding intimacy. They're protecting the conditions under which real intimacy is even possible. And those conditions are quieter, slower, and rarer than the culture admits. You also stop chasing the version of yourself that other people preferred. The louder one, the more agreeable one, the one who showed up to every event and laughed on cue. That version was a costume, not a self. The self underneath the costume is quieter, sharper, more selective, and far more honest. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need constant feedback. It just needs space to keep being real. And the strange gift is this: the longer you live as that self, the more the right people start finding you. Not in crowds, not in loud rooms, in small, almost accidental moments that feel weirdly easy. Here's the hard truth: you will keep being misread. Some people will keep calling you cold, distant, arrogant, antisocial, hard to know. And you will keep choosing your peace anyway, because you know what it costs to build. And here's the freeing one: your aloneness was never the problem. It was the proof that you'd rather be quietly whole than loudly accompanied by people who couldn't actually reach you. Because the self-sufficient introvert isn't running from connection. They're holding the door open for the kind of connection most people are too distracted, too noisy, and too afraid to ever walk through.